Welcome to another edition of Business Insights. The show is all about providing in-depth insight on current happenings in the business world. We also bring you information on various economies of the world. We'll begin with the news, which is an update of market and economic trends. I am Blessing AG. Please stay tuned. Get to know your state. Our take-off point is Nigeria. The head of the Nigerian Association of Liquefied Petroleum Gas Marketers, Olatubosun Oladakpo, has said that Nigerians will need to pay more for cooking gas starting from mid-August 2023. In a recent report about the price of LPG in June 2023 from the National Bureau of Statistics, it was revealed that the price to refill a 12.5 kg LPG tank went down by 4.35% from May 2023 to June 2023, going from 9,537 naira 89 kobo to 9,123 naira 25 kobo. Also within the same month of the previous year, the cost of refilling a 12.5 kg tank came down by 3.82% from 9,485 naira 91 kobo in June 2022. The reason for this increase, according to Oladakpo, is due to a rise in prices at the international market, adding that taxes are higher, cost of transporting the gas is more, and the naira has fallen greatly to the dollar. And talking about the National Youth Service Corps certificate, the National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, is embarking on an innovative project to utilize blockchain technology for authenticating National Youth Service Corps NYSC certificate. Director General of NITDA, Yusuf Kashafu, discussed this development during a policy dialogue about implementing the national blockchain in Lagos State. Kashafu mentioned that NITDA has collaborated with the DG of NYC, Kashau Ahmed, to lead the creation of an advanced blockchain-based system for verifying certificates. He stressed the importance of this initiative in tackling the increasing concerns regarding fraudulent issuance and forgery of NYC certificates. He urged relevant authorities in the country to harness the potential of blockchain technology to modernize the certificate verification process. Moving now to the Middle East, in an effort to elevate the standards of patient care to new heights, an Abu Dhabi quaternary healthcare facility has introduced a state-of-the-art Da Vinci robot system which will enable surgeons to perform complex, minimally invasive procedures with exceptional precision and efficiency, according to the director of robotic surgery at the hospital, Dr. Jafar Abu. Also, he said the Da Vinci robot system has several advantages over the conventional surgery, such as increased surgical precision, enhanced visualization, and shorter recovery time. Da Vinci Chi was named after the Italian artist Leonardo da Vinci for his accurate study and representation of human anatomy. The United States President Joe Biden has signed an executive order that would prevent some new U.S. investment in China, especially in three areas, namely semiconductors and microelectronics, quantum information technologies, and certain artificial intelligence systems. In a letter to Congress, President Biden said he was declaring a national emergency to cope threats of advancement in sensitive technologies and products very relevant to the military, intelligence, surveillance, and cyber-enabled capabilities. However, China, through its Ministry of Commerce chief, expressed its reservation about the order, which it says affects normal operation and decision-making of enterprises, thereby undermining the international economic and trade order. Similarly, the Chinese Foreign Ministry have expressed displeasure at the U.S. insistence on introducing investment restrictions on China. In a reaction following the U.S. decision to ban some tech investment in China, Britain says it is still considering what best possible action to take as it weighs some possible national security risk. According to the spokesperson for Prime Minister Souq administration, President Biden's executive order lends some important clarity on his approach on the matter. England, through its Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, had in April sought to protect itself by limiting national security threats posed by China as it deals with its hit in trade, investment and climate change, even as the countries had in the past experienced some issues bordering on security rules in Hong Kong and alleged cases of human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. The United Nations Food Agency has reported that rice prices has risen to its highest in almost 12 years following the ban on rice export from India and the bad weather conditions that could affect rice production. The Food and Agriculture Organization FAO all rice price index for July rose by 2.8% to 129.7 points. Compared to 2022, the figure rose by 19.7%, the highest nominal value since September 2011, according to data from the Food and Agriculture Organization FAO. India accounts for more than 40% of the world's rice trade, and this restriction on rice exports poses threat to food security in the world. Senior analyst at Global Food and Agriculture Bank, Rabobank Oscar Jakra, says a higher FAO rice price index for July versus August will most likely be seen, adding that India's non-basmati white rice export ban came at a time of seasonal low inventories in major world suppliers of rice, especially those in Asia. As part of the sanction, as impact of the sanction on Russia wears on, the new development bank, NDB, established by the member nations in BRICS, have been advised by the South African Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana to consider increasing its local currency fundraising and lending. Increasing local currency will form part of discussions at BRICS Summit, to which South Africa will play host later this month. The conversation will focus on increasing local currency usage amongst NDB's member states with the aim of de-risking the effect of foreign exchange fluctuations rather than de-dollarization. Since Russia invaded Ukraine, the greenback had gained against new market currencies, even as the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates to fight against inflation in 2022, making dollar debt more expensive to service. And now coming to the market at the Nigerian exchange yesterday, a total of 361,197,264 shares and 5,531 Ds were traded. The market value of the trades are 5.7 billion naira. In comparison with the previous trading day, which is Wednesday, 9th August, there is a 52% improvement in volume, 119% improvement in turnover, but 8% decline in deals. Market capitalization of the Nigerian Stock Exchange is 35.5 trillion naira. Now, 116 companies, listed equities companies at the NGX participated in trading, ending with 23 gainers and 17 losers. Chedorams led the gainers with 10% share price appreciation, closing at 4 naira 40 kobo per share, and they were followed by SCOA Nigeria. Dangote Cement came third, and Thomas Wyatt Nigeria came fourth. Now, on the losers list, we have CAP, which came out last with an end-of-day price depreciation of 10% at 19 naira 80 kobo per share. They were followed by Academy Press, Dangote Sugar Refinery, and GlaxoSmithKline Consumer followed. Now, for the companies with highest volume of trade, First Bank Nigeria Holdings had the highest volume of trade with 140 million shares traded. That was followed quickly by Fidelity Bank with 21.6 million shares. And then we have Universal Insurance Company with 18.7 million shares, and Transcorp Nigeria having 17.3 million of its shares traded. Moving now to the Botswana Stock Exchange, where yesterday's trading ended with a total of 248,508 shares traded in 25 deals with a market value of 960,721. Now, when we compare that with the previous trading day, which was Wednesday, there was a 683% improvement in volume, 36% improvement in turnover, and 19% improvement in deals. So from the Botswana Stock Exchange, we'll move on now to commodities and find out what major commodities trade at the global market. Now for wheat, you have the price there on the screen. We also have that of Brent crude and silver. We also have a copper. So for wheat, it sells at 641 United States cent, and gold sells for 1,918 US dollar per troy ounce, and copper sells for $3.79 US state dollar. So silver sells for $22.85 for per troy ounce, and then crude sells for 86.75 US dollar per barrel. Lastly, let's take a look at currency exchange. The Naira exchanges to the dollar at an official rate of 769 Naira. It exchanges to the Great Britain pounds at 978 Naira. To euro, it is 1 euro to 847 Naira, and Ghana cedis 1 Naira to 70 Ghana cedis. And this is where we wrap up the news segment on Business Insight. Let's have a quick break and return for stock market analysis, discussion of some of the stories that made the news to provide you with insight on them, and then look closely at some type of small businesses that are contributing to the economy. I am Blessing AHA. Please stay for the rest part of the show. Thanks for being there. So let's begin to look at trading yesterday at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, where we had some improvements. Yes, we had 119% improvement in turnover, but we had 8% decline in deals, and we had 52% in improvement in terms of volume of trade. Sam Oroje, who is Director of Policy, Research and Development, Femi Wash Limited, is here to look at those issues with me this morning. Good morning, sir. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure always. So looking at trading yesterday, 119% improvement in turnover. What would that mean for shareholders?
More gain. The market is responsive to the business environment. So more gains. If they traded more in volumes, then it will impact positively on the stock holders, and subsequently maybe that is coming as a result of good showing in some of those companies that gained strength in the market yesterday.
Okay, but we had 8% decline in deals.
Well, deals are a function of the trading on a particular day. So it's not always static. The deals, sometimes they are down, sometimes they are up. So it depends on the way the market is reacting to the various businesses that trade on the Nigerian Stock Exchange.
Okay, now looking at the number of companies that participated in trading, we had 116 listed equities participating in trade, and of that number, only 23 were gainers and then 17 losers. Does that look like some companies or some trades didn't really go well at all if 116 listed equities participated in the trade and we have just 23 gainers, 17 losers?
Well, 23 gainer is on the upward side and 17 losers. Then what it portends is that some that were traded on, we just look at the fundamentals of those companies that had a good showing in the market. So there's a tilt for the market for those who came in on a positive note. So the negative side gradually will balance itself off, maybe in the new market week. Surprises may come for those deals that were not considered based on the market trend on the trading floor yesterday, I guess.
Okay, so coming now to the volume of trade, as we had it yesterday, so it seemed to almost be the same, where the banking sector had the highest volume of trade, because we have First Bank Holdings having the highest volume of trade of 140 million traded shares, and that followed by Fidelity Bank, and then we had the Universal Insurance Company coming third, and also Transco.
Yeah, if you look at the annual report of First Bank Holding, they came on a positive note. For a long time, First Bank Holding had some challenges, and for the first time for a long while, I think they came out on a very positive note, and investors are looking forward to getting a scrip issue, or what you call a dividend, the capital gain as well. Then in addition to that, the financial sector is a highly regulated sector, is a prime mover of other sectors. So I can see why investors are doing more with those trades. Highly regulated is a core enabler for other businesses, and that shows why you have a high level of interest. And particularly for First Bank, that did extremely very well. People are buying into that environment so that they can take advantage of a possible scrip issue, what you call the dividend warrant. So people want to benefit from that.
Away from stock now to some emerging economic developments. President Biden has signed an executive order restricting certain U.S. tech investments in China. Now, that didn't go well with China, even as UK is also weighing its response to U.S. ban on tech tech investment in China. Now, according to China's Ministry of Commerce chief, he's expressed his reservation about the order, and he says it affects normal operation and decision-making of enterprises, and it undermines the international economic and trade order. But the reason the U.S. gave for actually restricting those the investment is that it was declaring a national emergency to curb threats of advancement in sensitive technologies and products very relevant to military intelligence, surveillance, and cyber-enabled capabilities. We know that for quite some time there's been a kind of trade war between the U.S. and China, but that seemed to have smoothened over time. But with this executive order, we expected to see some form of reciprocity from China.
In terms of national interest, America may be acting in its own national interest. Therefore, if China has some reservation in respect of that executive order, is their place to do that. But what is important in international economic relations, people pursue their national interests above other interests. Therefore, over a period of time, once the issues are properly looked into, in terms of China trying to respond in that regard, is okay, but would America jeopardize its own national interest because they have a trade relationship with China? On the other hand, the Chinese government may respond in a reciprocal way to undermine some of U.S. investment in China. So in terms of reciprocity, that may come into play between the two nations. So, but China does not really have a say really what constitutes a threat to U.S. national interests.
But that seems to be like something that will spiral into other economies, because the UK already is considering a response to US ban. What if the UK comes up with a similar order and then the rest of Europe follows, or some countries in Europe follow suit, and you have some countries which are allies to China coming up with a reciprocal order, and so thereby making the global trade to be difficult? Do you foresee something like that happening?
There's a trade disorder already between China and the US, even though there's some level of subtle interplay in the last few years. But that disorder, uncertainty between the two countries has always been. But like they say in international politics or local politics, no permanent enemy, no permanent friend, only permanent interests that do exist. From that perspective, if UK equally want to do that, if it's against their national interests, why not? So what is important is that every country will weigh its national interest, and once there's a threat to national interest, then the company will want to act in their own interest.
Talking of acting on interest, the NDB, talking about a new development bank, and that was established by BRICS, which is the coming together of certain nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So South Africa's finance minister has advised the BRICS to turn to local currencies as Russia's sanction bites. And since Russia invaded Ukraine, it is reported that the greenback had gained against new market currencies, and so with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates to fight against inflation, making dollar debt, it has made dollar debt more expensive. So the new development bank member states turning to local currencies amidst the Russia issue, how is it going to impact on them? Would they be able to find a common local currency to deal in?
It's a regional bloc. They have a regional interest, and if they want to float a bank for the purpose of doing business within that regional bloc, is a welcoming development. How sustainable is a different question. What are the international economic relation dynamics that will come from that economic bloc? But I think that bloc is is sufficiently strong enough within the international system to be able to float whatever currency they want to float. The dominance of the US dollar in international trade needs some reform. Since the Bretton Woods institution post-Second World War, dollarization has continued to be a common denominator in international trade and finance. Therefore, if you have blocs who are trying to float other currencies, in my personal view, such options should be explored to expand the scope of trading within the international system.
Thank you very much, Sam Oroje, for providing insight on some of these issues. Well, regarding the break turning to local currencies, they say that it's not about the dollarization, actually, that is about de-risking the effect of foreign exchange. But, well, some see that as some excuse, which you just may have alluded to a little because of the if they want to de-dollarize and find a common currency. But we don't know what currency that would be. Would it become China's currency that will be adopted within the bloc for facilitation of trade within the bloc? We'll get to see, only time will tell. Again, thank you for being with us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
We'll go to break and then return to look at the craft industry. This is the wrap of the series on the role of small businesses in the economy. After this break, we'll continue talking about that. All right, thank you for staying. So let's look at the craft industry now. This is an industry that cuts across different businesses. You have lots of artisans in this industry. You have those who are into pottery, bead making, jewelry, furniture. You have a lot of people, textile and clothing in this industry. And so to talk about this today, we have John Ogunlila, who's MD Thermoclays. He's in the process of setting up ceramics production plants in Nigeria. We'd like to look at all of that. Ceramics here, just I mentioned pottery, and you know that it has also evolved into something more modern. And some of us use this product without even knowing where they come from, how they are made. Good morning, John Ogunlele. Thank you for joining us on Business Insights.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's look at this industry, the craft industry. It is very vital to traditional societies and it plays an important role in the economy. Before we begin to talk about the role or roles the craft industry plays in the economy, let's talk about some of the businesses in the craft industry. Tell us about them.
Well, the craft industry is quite wide, and the practitioners don't see it as industry per se most of the time. They see it more of an art expression, is the way they express their gifts, their talents, and most of these things aren't done exactly with money in focus. One of it is the craft wine, for example. There is the well-known palm wine. The practitioners just go in the money tap very few trees relatively. They're not interested in industrializing it. But the connoisseurs of craft wine, they wait for the palm wine man. He brings it early and they praise the drink, ad nauseam. It's something they are into. You have craft pots. The town of Shaki is well known for that, aluminum pot. They cast it in some of the basic ways and go to the market with it. Then you have the, like you said, textile aspect, ashoke, the adire, So these things exist. The ceramic aspect is getting less known, but I think the lady that has made that most famous is Ladi Kwale, the woman from the north in Abuja.
The one we get to see on the 20 Naira notes.
The one we see on the 20 Naira note. Thank you.
All right, now, so for some of
these businesses. Music.
All right, go ahead.
Come again.
You were talking about more of the businesses. Let's have them.
There's some specialized genre of music that just have its followers. The kind of music Orlando brought to us, for example, I would call that a craft music. He was the only person in the line, and his devotees know him, they go for him, and he polishes it to their taste, to the taste of his talent, I would say. And he commanded his followership. So we have these things all over the place. In the north, you have calabash crafting, decoration, you have bead making, they're all over the place. But you see, these things are more of works of art than the practitioners only consider themselves lucky to be making money out of it. Usually, they want to use it to express some forms of art. And it's well known in economics that when there is a depression, a downturn in the economy, the first things to go are the arts. So when you have a troubled economy, people turn away from specialized things. Why will you go for ashoke when you can buy industrial clothing? Why will you go for craft wine when you can order a bottle of beer? Because crafts are more expensive. So they're supposed to be more expensive. So the prolonged depression, downturn in the economy has devastated the arts and has affected the crafts negatively. Then, of course, the Chinese came. I was surprised the first day I saw Chinese ashoke. Very light, as light as a fool's head, and people are buying it. Then the ashoke, they came up with the version of ashoke and all that Today, very extremely few people are really making the crafts ashoke and adire. But all these industries need to be recognized, especially by the various states, what do you call it, ministries of commerce, and protected. You know, protectionism isn't wrong. You can't open your borders to everything. You have to protect things that reflect your culture, things that reflect your arts, things that reflect the expressions of your people.
All right, now you mentioned that a lot of this people who are in the craft industry see it more like a gift, a talent, not as business. Why haven't we turned it into business? If we have people who are having their own kind of craft in other countries, turning it to business and bringing it here as cheap imports, and they stifle the economy of the craft industry in Nigeria. Why haven't businesses in the craft industry in Nigeria come together and find ways to turn their talent into money-making ventures?
Yes, that's the management of it. You see, there is a way things are managed and presented to the public. Well, I think the street language for that today is packaging. They call it packaging. Crafts are essentially crafts, and they resist industrialization by the very nature of the thing. In Canada and the United States, for example, you have craft housing. And in craft housing, they use timber to to construct the whole building, usually a bungalow. Very heavy timber, and there's a way they would cut the notches and dovetail the members. And then you see this massive bungalow built entirely of wood. It's very, very expensive. Some of those homes cost as much as $2 million. Is for people who know about it. It's not an industrial or commerce market. And the practitioners protect the industry by resisting commercialization. Nobody will go and build a 100 units estate using that sort of thing, for example. No. They don't want that. They limit access. It's an exclusive market. So when someone is producing a show, okay, is into a bespoke industry that needs to be protected, first by the practitioners in that industry, and then assisted by the government. I don't see, for example, why we should allow the importation of ashoke into the country from China, things that are woven with machine. What the Chinese people bring in is not, it's all commerce, it's industrial. They set up the normal looms, you know, and pound out the clothing and export to Africa. We shouldn't allow that. In protecting the craft industry, it should be clear that, oh, this is handmade. That's the normal language for such things. This handmade, real ashoke, you might say from Abeokuta. And then you limit production, which as supplies goes down, price increases. The Iranians are still making their Persian carpets till today. They protect the craft industry. That is industrial Persian carpet. But when you see the handmade, and I know it's extremely expensive, 100,000.
All right, now let's look at the availability of enough supply from the local industry to meet the demand. For instance,
before you can get it.
All right. For instance, in the ashoke business, if we limit the markets again to only the local producers because they are handmade, doesn't that mean that we will not have enough to meet the market, which has in one way opened the door to importation of ashoke? All right, now, there are two sides to this coin. Now, Ogunlela was talking about the people who are in the craft industry having to do their craft by hand, and then they protect the craft even. There's limited access to persons who may want to learn this craft to it. There's limited access into players that may even want to modernize the way this craft is being done. So looking at the restriction around this craft, it seemed like that at the end of the day reduces the supply that comes from the industry, which will make people, or has made people, turn to other source of getting some of the products of this supply. So Ogunlela, let's look at this. It looks like a coin that has two sides. While there is the issue of cheap imports stifling the economy, it seems what has opened the door for this import is not having enough of these local products. And so, in the bid to get more, people are beginning to see varieties, even though the variety that they are seeing may not be up to the standard of what we get in the industry. How do we break this monopoly that comes as a form of tradition, wanting to protect certain crafts, so that there can be government intervention, modernized ways of producing these materials can come in so we can have enough and monetize this?
Oh, yes. You talking about monetizing. I have said earlier that the craft industry is monetized, but it is not industrialized. And usually the money is not the focus of the practitioners. Let's get the dynamics right.
Okay, there is
We
monetization
don't
already,
industrialize.
but we don't have industrialization.
Yes, we shouldn't
Okay.
have industrialization, because when you have industrialization, mass production, you destroy the craft basis of the art, of the practice. Um, Now, there has to be a balance, because this looks to be extreme position. We think that when something is in demand, then you should flood the market with it. And I was talking about exclusivity. We need to understand ourselves in that aspect also. Let's say we have 10 people producing aluminum pots in Lagos, or, in the Association of Aluminum Pot Production Producers. We have 3 such centers making 30 people. One of the ways to limit access is to give a maximum number of apprentices each person can have at a time, maybe 3, maybe 2, okay? And then you can't run away from modernization also. I see the pot they produce, they only cast those pots, and then they don't machine. Normally in production, when you cast, normally they use sand casting. When you cast from sand, you have to also machine to smoothen the rough edges. So, and those things have to be incorporated. And the tools, the machine tools for those operations aren't even expensive. The government can come in here, and the association also, to discuss the ways of modernization. To what extent do you want to modernize? Do you want to smoothen rough edges using hand tools only, or you want to use process line? Normally, you should use hand tools. And to what extent? And then you can change your style, you can add more products, but the basis, the traditional basis of the art should be retained. And it should be emphasized that this is a thing meant for those who appreciate the art behind it. The same for Ashoke. Now, the Ashoke thing, I remember watching a video of a European making Ashoke. There is a way they brought in the fractal, what we call fractal mathematics into this. Fractals are shapes that are mathematically generated and cannot be repeated, except you store the file and then you recycle that file. And you see what they came out with is extremely beautiful. It's just extremely beautiful. So everything has to be improved upon. After all, the raw material basis for this thing, they actually, okay, you use cotton. And unfortunately, most of the cotton is imported, and there are different qualities of cotton. So we have to improve on the art, but not to the point of industrialization, not to the point where you have more machine than human beings. doing the work,
All right,
because
picking it up
the
from
machines
raw
can practically
materials, which you just mentioned, that some of the raw materials are imported because they are cotton. So for the leather industry and some other industries, how is the access to the raw materials for production? Let's begin with the leather industry. The government, the federal government, some time ago advocated the need for people to stop the consumption of um, cow skin, which a lot of
skin. Yeah.
Nigerians have preference for. So how is the access to the raw materials to support production in craft industry?
The Pomor's issue, when I first heard of it, I found it a bit amusing. And the government itself didn't carry out the campaign in a way that was convincing. They just broached the idea of stopping the consumption of palm oil. Of course, you meet with resistance. The human nature is like that. But there are other ways you could have introduced it. Tell people palm oil, is almost empty of nutrients, of nutrition, as you say it. Okay, it's made of proteins that are denatured. So the consumption of it add very little or nothing to you. When you educate people like that, you can influence their attitude. And if you can influence their attitude, you can nudge them to go the way you want them to go. Another thing is you need to produce more. They can't eat all the mama in the world. If there is more production, if there is, you have more output of cows and goats. For example, this red goats, we call Hausa goats, its skin is extremely valuable. And we are not producing enough. If you go to a place like Akwa Ibom, for example, they kill a lot of goats there and very, very few cows. And that's one where Calabar side, you have a huge market for goats. But there is not enough. There is not even enough for the Poma, much less the leather to servicing the leather industry. So we need to raise production across a board. If you increase production and there is income attached to the leather, of course you're going to have more leather available for the leather industry. So the issue is more of the production base. Talking about clothing, for example, also the textile craft, it still boils down to production. You import everything. You import the cotton basis for they call it teru, some jurisdictions. If there is local production of cotton, you're going to have more results. You are going to have more materials going around at affordable prices. So this is the basic problem in our economy anyway, that there is no production. And that's a different animal we can discuss another time. So increased production will give you increased raw materials, increased food. When you have supply, people can diversify. The craft industry can have what they need to keep on going or keep going on.
So let's look at the contribution of the craft industry in the economy. We find that some sectors or some businesses in the craft industry predominantly have women.
Oh, yes.
So why do we have
the
that?
craft industry, you're correct, because the craft industry is usually not not demanding of physical labor, physical energy. It's something you can do sitting down, except, well, maybe for the aluminum pots, very physical, whatever. And I see a lot of men. I think there is a preponderance of men there. But actually, okay, for example, you just sit down and you keep walking.
Okay, so how significant is the contribution of the
it's one
industry
way
to the economy?
Extremely significant. when you look at it from the point of view that this is something that can be engaged in by millions of women who have little capital and who are even mothers and homekeepers, what we call full-time housewives. It's extremely important that you engage these people in some productive way. And the crafts opened up that channel. The capital to start those things are so small, many of the times are so small. To buy a loom for textile, for Asha, okay, I don't think even 100, maybe 200,000, and a loom is ready. Raw materials, the consumables, maybe another 50,000. And the woman is working from home. And she doesn't need a shop. She just needs some space outside or even within the house. And she's in business. To set up the aluminum pots, whatever, you don't need a space that's bigger than a room and a half outside, maybe a shed outside at the back of your the backyard of your house, and you are in business. So this forms a veritable avenue for engaging women, for engaging low-income earners. And if we add training, both training in management and in production of their art, can see a lot of improvement, a lot of livelihood created, and a lot of lives bettered.
All right, now, so how do we sustain the craft industry? I know you talked about the fact that it's monetized already, but it doesn't have to be industrialized. So, but by way of policies and infrastructures, what support does the craft industry need for sustenance?
The craft industry is suffering now, and it has to keep unfortunately, it has to keep enduring as long as the entire economy is crawling. But outside of that, the first thing we need to do is to form these people into cooperative societies that are focused on increasing their slice of the economy, of the market. I noticed many of the cooperative societies you have out there, they hone themselves to preserve exclusivity. They preserve people from joining their organization. They impose huge taxes on anybody who wants to come in, whether apprentices or they just want some kind of exclusivity, and this isn't good enough. They have to be business-minded. They have to be focused on how they can make their arts, their crafts better, make themselves more productive. If you are into pottery, for example, the challenges are much. If you go into the engobing aspects of pottery, for example, our pottery is still limited to what you call red wares. Okay, the pottery that come out of Nigeria are just these red color things. Flower vases, usually outdoor flower vases and all that, and different kind of shapes, conical and all that of vases. Why don't we go into this art should have been upgraded long ago to make tablewares, for example. There is nobody in Nigeria, no craft person is making tablewares in Nigeria. Practically all our tableware are from Turkey and China. Okay, and this could have been, you see, you can also develop the craft industry into cottage industry and into small scale enterprises. Nobody makes
thank you very
cups.
much. We're seeing how far that the craft industry can go and how more impactful it can be. We just hope that the necessary things are done with government setting the stage and those like in the craft industry, like you mentioned, having an open mind to embrace new developments so that we don't box ourselves when there's so much more to benefit from the talent, because you said they see it as talent. Thank you very much, John Ogunlela, for being on Business Insights. All right, it's a wrap For this week, we've looked at the roles of small businesses in the economy. You've seen it from Monday, talking about one business onto the other. We looked at information business. We've looked at the craft industry. We've looked at different businesses. Now, if you missed any of the edition, all you need to do is just go to our YouTube channel, Souq News, and then find any of the videos, watch and get updated. Maybe you want to start one of that business. Don't worry, you can thank us later. I am Blessing AG. Business Insight comes your way again on Monday. Bye.